Hello and welcome to the 7th of December Advent Calendar window for the 2024 Panto Advent Calendar. Let me open up the window and see what we've got inside. Right, here we go. Fat Fighters. When have you streamlined an aspect of a set of wargames rules? Why did you do that? And what was the result on the tabletop? Oh, okay. Streamlining rule sets is one of the hardest parts of a game designer's job, but also one of the most important areas of the, often unwritten brief that we have to work to. Streamlining is not just one thing. It can mean many things. It can be a physical reduction of the number of rules present in a game. That's fairly obvious. What do we want to keep? What do we want to get rid of? It can be the simplification of a specific mechanism that you definitely want to retain, but which you feel isn't doing the job as efficiently as it could do. Maybe it's clunky or unwieldy. Or it can simply be the streamlining of the language used in order to better convey the game designer's intent. None of these are particularly easy, but all are very necessary. Streamlining text for clarity of intent is one of the hardest areas to achieve, as wargames rules tread a fine line between informing the reader of what the rule is and telling them why it is what it is. With the first edition of Chain of Command, and certainly with earlier rule sets like I Ain't Been Shot, many of the design concepts that we were using were so unusual, so left field, that I felt that it was necessary not just to state what the rule is, but to explain some of the thinking behind it. This wasn't an alien concept. Indeed, several friends in the US have used the term chatty English rules to describe that approach, and it was a path that was historically taken by many of the early game designers, and my using it wasn't entirely a shock, but it certainly contrasts starkly with the more legal style of hex-based wargames that tended to set the precedent for the way rules presentation was handled across the pond. Writing the second edition of Chain of Command as we speak, the brief has changed. Some of the concepts that we use, such as friction, were completely off the wall, right at the margins of the hobby 13 years ago. But they're now far more mainstream, and I don't think we have moved our position, but I think a lot of the hobby has come more towards us in accepting that a lot of what we had to say was actually pertinent. You know, the days of having rule sets with absolutely no command and control system whatsoever, which used to be entirely normal, really doesn't exist anymore. So now the emphasis has been on cleaning up the language so that the rules are going to be less chatty, more precise, and where explanation is needed, we tend to use sidebars or text box areas so as to keep the what and the why separate. We saw this in Midgard with the very attractive comment sections that were in there between the two main protagonists in the rule books. And I feel that worked very well. And it's something we've done in the past with huge arse in Troops, Weapons and Tactics. And that's something that I would be keen to develop and take further. Did a similar thing with Strength and Honour, with Trajan's Top Tips, and also in Dave Brown's General Dame second edition, where we had the word from the Marshal giving us those insights into the history behind the design. Streamlining detail is just as important. As a game designer, it shouldn't be remarkable that I like messing about with game mechanisms. As somebody dedicated to the study of history, I also love the historical detail that makes events of the past relatable to us now. And unfortunately, that can be a dangerous combination, as it leaves me inclined to create rules that are there to reflect some minute difference that are important to the historian, but which may well not be particularly important in the grand scheme of game design. It's critical to look at these areas and these very unique rules and say, what does that extra detail bring to the game? What bang am I getting for that particular buck? And a decision has to be made. Does differentiating between those two weapons add important detail, or does it simply confuse and create uncertainty? Nick always says to me, if you're the bloke firing the weapon, you know that it's a 7.62mm round, you know what your weapon is, you know what the velocity is, but for the bloke on the end of it, they don't care about the caliber, they don't care about the velocity, they just know they're being shot at. In other words, consider the effect rather than what's causing it. And these are wise words. Me showing off my knowledge of microscopic historical detail is far better done in a pub over a few pints than in a rule set. However, having said that, we've got to take care not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. History must remain at the core of a game if it's to have plausibility. What to keep and what to remove are key design choices, and often they find the game designer on a knife edge, but you have to come down one side or the other. Equally, we have streamlining of mechanisms that we most certainly do want to keep because they do provide historical detail that we think is absolutely pertinent and important. But maybe the mechanisms that we've got need to be more intuitive, need to be more slimmed down. A classic case in point is the AFV damage tables in the first edition of Chain of Command. I wanted the granularity of detail, which I felt enhanced the narrative of the game, and I still want that. However, I've never been really happy that we had to consult the table in the rules every time. Flicking through pages of a rulebook is the ultimate wargaming passion killer. It lifts you out of the moment. It takes you away from the suspended reality of the game and reintroduces the stark realities of broad day, and not always what you want. So my objective was to retain the granularity of detail whilst removing the need to consult the table. I utilised the existing system of shock to introduce an element of uncertainty, so where an AFV has suffered damage, the commander only knows that John the driver is stunned when he orders him to move. Fixed damage is still there, but the more shock the vehicle has, the more the crew are likely to be temporarily unable to act. Now, that net result of making those changes is that we now play without a play sheet or QRS because the outcome is clear, but it's also unpredictable. And that unpredictability has always very much been at the core of the games that I like to design. Nothing should be predictable, and that's certainly the case. Sadly, I think you're going to have to wait until April to get the full details on that, but hopefully we will be presenting you with what's been a slimmed down and more attractive version of Chain of Command.